For 18 years, Rachel Torres had fixed the most delicate watch mechanisms in her small repair shop, her surgeon-steady hands dismissed by everyone as those of a simple craftsperson. But when elite Green Berets faced an impossible mission requiring a 1,200-meter precision shot that could save American hostages, they would discover that the quiet shopkeeper was actually the military's most legendary sniper, hiding in plain sight with skills that defied belief. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Fine Time Repairs, casting long shadows across the cluttered workbench where Rachel Torres bent over a vintage Omega Speedmaster. At 45, her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her weathered hands moved with the kind of precision that came from decades of working with mechanisms where a single misplaced movement could destroy hours of careful labor. The bell above the shop door chimed as four men in civilian clothes entered, their tactical boots and rigid postures immediately marking them as military despite their attempts to blend in. Rachel didn't look up from the watch movement she was examining under her magnifying glass, but her peripheral vision cataloged everything: height, weight, dominant hands, the way they moved their eyes to scan for threats that didn't exist in a small-town watch repair shop. "Ma'am," the largest of the men said, his voice carrying the clipped authority of someone accustomed to giving orders. "We're looking for someone who can do precision work, very precision work." Rachel set down her tools and looked up, her dark eyes meeting those of Sergeant Major Derek Walsh, though she didn't know his name yet. "Depends on what kind of precision you need. If it's timekeeping, I can get most pieces running within a few seconds per month. If it's something else..." She let the sentence hang, noting how the four men exchanged glances. They were Green Berets, she could tell from the way they carried themselves, the subtle hand signals they used, and the particular brand of confident professionalism yet marked special operations personnel. "We heard you do custom work," said Staff Sergeant Kevin Park, the youngest of the group. His tone carried a hint of skepticism, as if he couldn't quite believe they were consulting a civilian shopkeeper about military matters. Rachel wiped her hands on a clean cloth, studying the men with the kind of assessment that most people wouldn't notice, but that made Sergeant First Class Mike Harrison slightly uncomfortable. There was something about her gaze that suggested she was seeing more than just four customers who'd wandered into her shop. "I do precision modifications," she confirmed. "What kind of tolerances are we talking about?" The question was casual, but it revealed knowledge that made Derek Walsh pause. Tolerances weren't something most civilian craftspeople discussed, and certainly not with the technical confidence that Rachel had just displayed. "Submillimeter?" Captain Bradley said, stepping forward. He was clearly the ranking officer, and his decision to engage directly suggested this consultation was more than casual curiosity. "We need work done that can't be off by even the smallest margin." Rachel nodded slowly, her expression giving nothing away. "Submillimeter precision is achievable, depending on the application. What kind of timepiece are we discussing?" "It's not exactly a timepiece," Derek admitted. "We need modifications to optical equipment, scopes, specifically. The kind of precision adjustment that, well, the kind where being off by a hair could mean the difference between mission success and failure." The shop fell silent except for the gentle ticking of dozens of clocks and watches. Rachel's hands rested motionlessly on her workbench, but Mike Harrison noticed that her breathing hadn't changed, her posture hadn't shifted. Most civilians would show some reaction to learning they were being asked to work on military equipment, but Rachel Torres remained perfectly calm. "Military optical equipment," she said, not really a question. "Scope modifications for long-range applications." Kevin Park shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we can't really discuss the specific applications, but you need someone who understands both the mechanical precision required and the real-world conditions the equipment will face. Someone who knows that a scope that's perfectly calibrated in a shop might perform differently at altitude, in varying temperatures, with different ammunition loads." The four Green Berets stared at her. This was not knowledge that a civilian watchmaker should possess, no matter how skilled she might be at fixing timepieces. "How do you know about scope calibration variables?" Derek asked directly. Rachel picked up the Omega movement again, examining it under her magnifying glass, as if the conversation were about nothing more significant than watch repair. You pick things up over the years. Hunters, competitive shooters, collectors who want their equipment maintained. You learn that precision isn't just about the mechanics, it's about understanding how those mechanics perform under stress. It was a plausible explanation, but something about her delivery made Tom Bradley suspicious. There was a confidence in her voice that suggested more than casual exposure to precision shooting equipment. "Ma'am," Mike Harrison said carefully, "the kind of precision we're talking about, it's not just competitive shooting. We need modifications that can maintain accuracy under conditions that would challenge most professional marksmen." Rachel finally looked up from her work, meeting Mike's gaze directly. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a recognition perhaps, or a memory of something she'd rather forget. "What kind of conditions?" Derek asked. "Extended range, challenging environmental factors, high-stakes situations where there's no margin for error." How extended? The question was sharp, focused, and delivered with the kind of intensity that made all four men pause. This wasn't idle curiosity. Rachel Torres was asking for specific technical information with the confidence of someone who understood exactly why those details mattered. 1,200 meters, Tom said after a moment's hesitation, maybe further depending on conditions. Rachel set down her tools completely and turned to face the men fully. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightened slightly, her hands became perfectly still, and her eyes took on a focus that hadn't been there moments before. 1,200 meters, she repeated slowly. With what kind of target parameters? Kevin Park felt a chill run down his spine. The woman asking the question wasn't the same person who'd been hunched over a watch movement minutes earlier. This version of Rachel Torres carried herself with the kind of controlled intensity that he'd only seen in the most experienced operators. "Small target," Derek admitted. "Precision shot required, lives depending on success." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between the four men as if weighing something they couldn't understand. Finally, she spoke. "You're not looking for a watchmaker who can modify scopes. You're looking for someone who understands what it means to make a shot at 1,200 meters when failure isn't an option." The shop fell completely silent. Outside, traffic moved normally down Main Street. People went about their daily business, completely unaware that a conversation was taking place that would challenge everything the four Green Berets thought they knew about the quiet woman who fixed their watches. "Ma'am," Mike Harrison said carefully, "what makes you think that?" Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to her workbench. But instead of picking up her watch tools, she opened a different drawer and removed something that made all four men freeze. It was a brass casing, polished to a mirror shine and engraved with coordinates and a date from 18 years ago. But what made their blood run cold was the caliber. .338 Lapua Magnum, the signature round of military precision marksmen. "Because," Rachel said quietly, not looking at them, "I know exactly what it means to make a shot at 1,200 meters when American lives depend on getting it right the first time." The ticking of the clocks seemed deafeningly loud in the silence that followed. Four elite Green Berets stood frozen in a small-town watch repair shop, staring at a brass casing that suggested the quiet shopkeeper they'd consulted for technical help might be something far more significant than they had ever imagined. Derek Walsh found his voice first. "Ma'am, I think we need to have a longer conversation." Rachel Torres picked up her watch tools again, her hands as steady as they'd been moments before. But now the four men understood that those steady hands might have a history that extended far beyond repairing timepieces. "Shop closes at 6, she said without looking up. "Come back then, and we'll discuss what kind of precision you really need." As the four Green Berets left the shop, each of them was thinking the same thing. They'd come looking for a craftsperson who can modify their equipment. Instead, they might have found something far more valuable and far more dangerous. Behind them, Rachel Torres continued working on the Omega Speedmaster, her movements as precise and controlled as ever. But now the men understood that her precision might extend far beyond the delicate mechanisms of luxury timepieces. The afternoon stretched ahead full of questions that couldn't be asked and answers that might change everything they thought they knew about the impossible mission they'd been assigned. Some precision, Rachel thought, as she adjusted a hairspring with movements measured in fractions of a millimeter, can only be learned through experience that most people pray they'll never need. The question was whether these young operators were ready to understand what real precision truly cost.
The Green Berets didn't wait until 6. Derek Walsh returned alone at 4:30, the bell chiming as he entered fine-time repairs, with the careful movement of someone who'd spent the afternoon reconsidering everything about their morning encounter. Rachel looked up from a Rolex Submariner she was servicing, noting how Derek positioned himself with clear sight lines to both the front door and the back exit. Old habits, she thought. The kind that kept people alive in places where exits mattered more than entrances. "Sergeant Major," she said, the rank falling naturally from her lips. Derek's eyes narrowed. He hadn't mentioned his rank during the morning visit. "How did you—" 23 years of service, Rachel continued, returning to her work. Started as enlisted, worked your way up. Ranger tab, Special Forces tab, probably a few deployments you can't talk about. The way you move, the way you assess a room, you're not just Green Beret, you're senior leadership." Derek remained standing, but his posture had shifted into something more attentive. "You're very observant for a watchmaker." "Have to be. When you're working with mechanisms this precise, you learn to notice everything. A speck of dust in the wrong place, a spring wound too tight, a balance wheel that's off by fractions. Small details that create big problems." She set down her tools and faced him directly, like noticing that Staff Sergeant Park favors his left side slightly. Old injury, probably shrapnel or bullet wound. Sergeant Harrison keeps checking his 6 even in a civilian shop. Recent deployment, still adjusting to being stateside. And Captain Bradley, she paused, carries himself like someone who's lost people under his command recently. Derek's blood chilled. Everything she'd observed was accurate, information that should have been invisible to a civilian. "How do you know all that?" "Same way I know you came back alone because you ran my name through databases and found exactly nothing. No military service record, no federal employment, no background that would explain why a small-town watchmaker knows the effective range of a .338 Lapua Magnum." Rachel moved to the shop's front window, adjusting the closed sign while keeping her back to Derek. "The question is whether you found nothing because there's nothing to find, or because someone made sure there was nothing to find." Derek's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed sidearm, then stopped. This conversation had moved far beyond equipment modification requests. "Ma'am, I think you need to be very clear about who you are and what you know." "I'm exactly who I appear to be," Rachel said, turning back to face him. "A woman who spent 18 years fixing timepieces, living quietly, bothering no one. But you're asking me to help with something that's not quiet, and that creates complications." "What kind of complications?" Rachel walked to her workbench and picked up a different watch, an old military-issue Hamilton that had seen better days. This belonged to a Marine, Vietnam era. He brought it in 3 years ago, said it stopped working the day his unit was ambushed. 47 years later, he finally wanted it fixed. She opened the case back, revealing a movement that was corroded and damaged beyond any reasonable hope of repair. "Took me 6 months of work, finding parts that don't exist anymore, rebuilding components from scratch, but it runs now, keeps perfect time." Derek watched her hands as she handled the delicate mechanism. There was something about her movements, controlled, precise, patient, that reminded him of the best marksman he'd ever worked with. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because some things can be fixed, Sergeant Major, and some things should stay broken. The question is whether you and your team understand the difference." Before Derek could respond, the shop door chimed again. Kevin Park entered, followed by Mike Harrison and Tom Bradley. All three men looked tense, alert, and considerably more suspicious than they had that morning. "Sergeant Major," Tom said, his voice carrying command authority, "we need to discuss our situation." Rachel continued working on the Hamilton as if 4 elite soldiers hadn't just filled her small shop with enough tension to make the air thick. "Staff Sergeant Park," she said, without looking up, "how's your left shoulder feeling today?" Kevin's hand moved instinctively to his shoulder, confirming Rachel's earlier observation. "How did you—" "Compensatory movements. You're favoring it without realizing it. Old injury, probably 18 months to 2 years. Healing well, but you still protect it unconsciously." Mike Harrison stepped forward. "Ma'am, we ran some checks on you. Your background is unusual." "How so?" "You don't have one," Derek said bluntly. "Rachel Torres first appears in public records 18 years ago when you opened the shop. Before that, nothing. No birth records, no school records, no employment history. It's like you materialized out of thin air." Rachel's hands never paused in their work, but Tom Bradley noticed a subtle change in her breathing pattern. "Identity records get complicated sometimes," she said carefully.
Not this complicated, Kevin insisted. We're talking about a complete absence of documentation, the kind of gap that only happens when someone with serious authority decides to erase a person's entire existence. The shop fell silent, except for the omnipresent ticking of timepieces. Rachel set down her tools and looked at each of the 4 men in turn, her expression unreadable. "Gentlemen," she said finally, "you came here asking for help with precision equipment modification. I can do that work. But if you're looking for answers about things that happened 18 years ago, you might want to consider whether those answers are something you really want to know." Derek leaned forward. "Try us." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then moved to a different part of her workbench. She opened a locked drawer and removed a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a scope adjustment tool unlike anything the Green Berets had ever seen. It was precision machined from what appeared to be titanium, with measurements etched so finely they were barely visible. But what caught their attention was the wear pattern on the tool. It had been used extensively under conditions that had left microscopic scratches and heat discoloration that spoke of field use in extreme environments. "This tool," she said, "can adjust scope windage and elevation to tolerances measured in fractions of arc minutes. I made it myself 18 years ago for equipment that required precision beyond what standard tools could provide." Mike Harrison leaned closer. "Ma'am, this is military-grade equipment. This isn't something a civilian could fabricate." "You're right," Rachel agreed. "A civilian couldn't make this. Just like a civilian couldn't know that Captain Bradley is planning a mission that requires a precision shot at extended range in hostile territory. Just like a civilian couldn't tell that all 4 of you are carrying stress patterns that suggest you're facing something with a very low probability of success." Tom Bradley's jaw tightened. "How do you know about our mission parameters?" "Because I recognize the signs," Rachel said simply. "The way you're moving, the questions you're asking, the timeline pressure you're all carrying. You're facing a high-value target extraction with limited options and a narrow window. And someone in your chain of command suggested consulting civilian assets because your standard approaches aren't working." Derek exchanged glances with his team. Everything Rachel had just described was accurate, but it was also classified information that no civilian should possess. "Ma'am, I need to ask you directly, are you or have you ever been affiliated with any military or intelligence organization?" Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then returned the precision tool to its box. "Sergeant Major, I fix watches. I've been fixing watches for 18 years. But if you need equipment modified for a 1,200-meter shot, I can do that work." It wasn't an answer, and all 4 men knew it, but it was also an offer that they couldn't ignore given the mission they were facing. "What would you need to know about the shot?" Tom asked. "Target size, environmental conditions, ammunition specifications, and the consequences of missing." Kevin shifted uncomfortably. The consequences of missing are that American hostages die. Rachel's hands stilled completely for the first time since the conversation began. When she looked up, her eyes held something that made all 4 Green Berets take an unconscious step back. American hostages, she repeated, her voice carrying a note that hadn't been there before. Something cold, controlled, and very dangerous. Yes, ma'am, Derek confirmed. High-value targets being held in a location that can only be reached by precision fire from extreme range. Rachel closed the box containing the precision tool and locked the drawer. Then she looked at each of the 4 men with an intensity that made them understand they were no longer talking to a shopkeeper. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "close the shop sign and lock the door. We need to have a very different conversation." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The afternoon light filtering through the closed blinds of fine-time repairs created patterns across Rachel's workbench as the 4 Green Berets settled into an uneasy semicircle around her. The casual atmosphere of their morning visit had evaporated completely, replaced by the tense professionalism of operators discussing classified material with an unknown asset. Derek Walsh pulled out a tablet and activated a secure communication app. "Before we go any further, I need to establish some ground rules. What we're about to discuss is classified at the highest levels." Rachel nodded, her hands continuing to work on the Hamilton watch as if national security briefings were routine occurrences in her shop. "Understood. But before you brief me on your mission, I need you to understand something about the kind of shot you're describing." She set down her tools and moved to a filing cabinet, retrieving a weathered notebook filled with calculations, environmental data, and detailed ballistic charts. The pages were covered in precise handwriting, complex mathematical formulas, and diagrams that made Mike Harrison lean forward with professional interest. "A 1,200-meter shot isn't just about marksmanship," Rachel began, opening the notebook to a section filled with wind speed calculations and bullet trajectory charts. "At that distance, you're dealing with bullet drop, wind drift, temperature variations, altitude effects, and the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation." Kevin Parks stared at the notebook. "Ma'am, where did you learn ballistic calculations at this level?" "Experience," Rachel replied simply, turning to a page that showed detailed range cards for various distances and environmental conditions. "A miss at 1,200 meters doesn't just mean you didn't hit the target. It means you've revealed your position, compromised the mission, and potentially gotten people killed." Tom Bradley studied the calculations over her shoulder. "These formulas, they're not standard military doctrine. This is advanced precision shooting theory. Standard doctrine works fine for most situations, but when you're dealing with extreme range in hostile environments, standard doctrine gets people killed. You need to understand variables that aren't covered in any manual." Derek activated his tablet and pulled up a satellite image, then paused. "Ma'am, before I show you this, I need to know, can you make the shot we're describing?" Rachel looked at him directly. "Sergeant Major, I need to know what I'm shooting at and why. Precision isn't just about the mechanics, it's about understanding the mission." Derek glanced at his team, receiving subtle nods of confirmation. 3 American intelligence operatives are being held in a compound in hostile territory. The building is situated such that conventional rescue approaches are impossible due to terrain and enemy force concentration. He turned the tablet toward Rachel, showing an aerial view of a fortified compound built into a mountainside. "The only viable approach requires a precision shot from an overwatch position approximately 1,200 meters away. The target is a guard tower that provides early warning for the entire facility." Rachel studied the image with the kind of focus that made all 4 men suddenly understand they were watching a professional assess an operational challenge. Her eyes moved systematically across the terrain, noting elevation changes, potential wind patterns, and sight lines with an expertise that went far beyond civilian knowledge. "Guard tower," she said, her finger tracing distances on the screen. "What's the target window?" 8-inch circle. Anything larger risks structural damage that could alert other guards before our assault team can breach." Rachel was quiet for several moments, her eyes still fixed on the satellite image. "Environmental conditions. Mountain terrain, variable winds,
temperature ranging from 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on time of day. Mission window is dawn, first light conditions. Dawn, Rachel repeated, nodding slightly. Thermal layering, shifting air currents, temperature differential between ground level and elevation. What's the time constraint? Tom Bradley leaned forward. The hostages are scheduled for execution in 72 hours. This is our only viable extraction option. The shop fell silent except for the ticking of timepieces. Rachel closed the satellite image and returned to her notebook, flipping to a section filled with range calculations from mountain terrain shots. Gentlemen, she said carefully, what you're describing isn't just a difficult shot, it's an impossible shot under standard operational parameters. Kevin felt his stomach drop. Ma'am, are you saying it can't be done? I'm saying it can't be done by someone who learned long-range shooting from military manuals and training courses. Rachel's voice carried a note of finality that made all four men tense. This kind of shot requires experience that you can't simulate. Knowledge that comes from situations where missing meant watching people die.
Derek studied her face, noting the way her expression had hardened when she mentioned watching people die. Ma'am, what kind of experience are you talking about? Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then opened a different section of her notebook. The pages contained detailed mission logs, range estimates, and environmental data from what appeared to be actual operational deployments. The kind of experience, she said slowly, that teaches you how to make a shot at 1,400 meters in 90-degree heat with crosswinds gusting to 30 miles per hour while enemy forces are actively searching for your position. Mike Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. Ma'am, that's not theoretical knowledge. No, it's not. Tom Bradley leaned forward. Rachel, I need to ask you directly, have you made shots like this before? Instead of answering, Rachel moved to another filing cabinet and retrieved a different item. A small wooden box that clearly held something significant. She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of brass casings, each one polished and engraved with coordinates, dates, and distances. Derek picked up one of the casings and read the engraving. Operation Black Eagle, 14 degrees north, 67 degrees east, 1,347 meters, confirmed. 1,400 meters, Kevin whispered, in combat conditions. Rachel took the casing back and returned it to the box. That shot saved 12 American contractors who were pinned down by enemy fire. Standard military response would have taken 4 hours to organize. Those men didn't have 4 minutes. The weight of that statement settled over the 4 Green Berets like a physical force. They were looking at evidence of operational capability that exceeded anything they'd encountered in their own military careers. Ma'am, Derek said carefully, how many of these shots have you made? Rachel gestured toward the box, which contained at least a dozen similar casings. Enough to know that what you're asking isn't about equipment modification. You need someone who can make an impossible shot under conditions that would challenge the best marksman in the world. Tom Bradley stood and walked to the shop window, processing what they'd just learned. Rachel, if you have this kind of capability, why are you running a watch repair shop? Because some things end. Careers end, missions end, wars end, but people still need their timepieces fixed, and that's work that doesn't require anyone to die. Mike Harrison was studying the ballistic calculations in her notebook. Ma'am, these formulas are more advanced than anything we learned in sniper school. Where did you develop these methods? In places where the textbook answers weren't sufficient, where missing meant mission failure, and mission failure meant people died. Derek made a decision that would change everything. Rachel, we need your help,
Not just with equipment modification, we need you to make the shot." The shop fell completely silent. Outside, life in the small town continued normally. People unaware that a conversation was taking place that involved life and death decisions for American hostages halfway around the world. "Sergeant Major," Rachel said quietly, "I haven't fired a precision rifle in 18 years. My hands are older, my eyes aren't what they were, and the world has moved on with me." "But you could make the shot," Kevin pressed. Rachel looked at each of the four men, seeing the desperation they were trying to hide, the weight of responsibility they carried for hostages they might not be able to save through conventional means. "You could make the shot." "I could make the shot, but making the shot means becoming someone I've spent 18 years trying not to be." Derek leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Rachel closed her notebook and locked it away, then faced the four operators with an expression that made them understand they were about to learn something that would change how they saw her and their mission. "I mean that the person who could make that shot officially died 18 years ago, and bringing her back means accepting consequences that none of us might be prepared for."
The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Derek Walsh felt his pulse quicken as he processed what Rachel had just revealed. Not just that she was capable of making impossible shots, but that her very existence was somehow classified at levels that required official death certificates. "Ma'am," Tom Bradley said carefully, "I think we need to understand exactly who we're talking to." Rachel moved to her workbench and picked up the Hamilton watch again, her hands resuming their precise movements as if discussing officially dead snipers was routine conversation. "Captain, what you need to understand is that some military operations require people who can't officially exist, people who can operate in situations where traditional military presence would create political complications." Kevin Park leaned forward. "Are you talking about black operations?" "I'm talking about operations so classified that the people who carry them out have to be officially erased afterward. New identities, new lives, complete separation from their previous existence." Rachel's voice carried no emotion, but Mike Harrison noticed her hands had stilled completely. "Because the alternative is spending the rest of your life being a security liability." Derek activated his secure tablet and sent a priority message to his command structure. "Ma'am, I need to contact my superiors. What you're describing suggests you're someone they need to know about." "Sergeant Major," Rachel said, looking up from the watch, "your superiors already know about me. The question is whether they're willing to admit it." Before Derek could respond, his tablet chimed with an incoming priority message. His expression changed as he read it. Then he looked at Rachel with a mixture of recognition and something approaching awe. "Angel 7, he said quietly. Rachel's hands froze completely. The watch tools clattered onto the workbench as she turned to face Derek with an intensity that made all four men instinctively step back. "Where did you hear that call sign?" she asked, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "My commanding officer just confirmed your identity," Derek replied, his own voice tight with controlled excitement. "You're Angel 7. The snapper who doesn't exist, the longest confirmed kill in military history." Tom Bradley felt his world shift. "The Helmand province shot? 2,000 meters plus? That was you?" Rachel stood and moved to the shop window, her back to the four men. Outside, normal life continued. People walking dogs, children riding bicycles, neighbors chatting over fence lines. A world away from the mountains of Afghanistan where impossible shots decided whether American soldiers lived or died. 2,047 meters, she said quietly. Taliban commander who was directing mortar fire against a forwarding operation base. 300 American personnel pinned down, medical evacuation impossible due to enemy fire. Mike Harrison did the math in his head. "Ma'am, that's over a mile in mountain conditions."
15-degree uphill angle, crosswinds gusting to 40 miles per hour, temperature differential between firing position and target of 38 degrees. Rachel's voice had taken on the flat, technical tone of someone recounting mission parameters. How do you make a shot like that under those conditions? Rachel turned from the window. You accept that missing means watching 300 Americans die, and you trust 18 years of training, experience, and instinct to compensate for variables that can't be calculated. Derek was still processing the implications. The mission report said Angel 7 was killed during extraction. Enemy contact, no survivors. The mission reports, Rachel said with a slight smile that contained no humor, said exactly what they needed to say. Sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones that officially don't exist. Tom Bradley leaned forward. So you've been here for 18 years, fixing watches while the military thinks you're dead? The military knows exactly where I am, but they also know that Angel 7 can't officially exist. The shots I made, the missions I completed, they were all politically unacknowledgeable. Having a sniper with my record walking around with official credentials would create complications that no one wanted to deal with. Mike Harrison began to understand. So they gave you a new identity and let you disappear. They gave me a choice. Continue operating under deep cover with no official support and constant risk of exposure, or accept extraction to a safe life with the understanding that Angel 7 was officially deceased. Derek studied her face. You chose the safe life? I chose to stop watching people die through rifle scopes. I chose to use precision for something other than ending lives. I chose to fix things instead of breaking them.
The shop fell silent again, but this time the silence was heavy with the weight of understanding. The 4 Green Berets were no longer looking at a mysterious shopkeeper. They were facing a legend whose existence had been classified beyond their security clearance. Kevin's tablet chimed with an incoming message. He read it quickly, then looked at Derek with obvious concern. Sergeant Major, we just received an update on the hostage situation. Timeline has been moved up. We have 36 hours, not 72. Rachel's head snapped toward Kevin. What changed? Intelligence indicates the hostages are going to be moved to a secondary location that we can't reach. If we don't extract them within 36 hours, they disappear completely. Tom Bradley was already planning. That gives us 24 hours for mission preparation and transit to the operational area, 12 hours for final positioning and shot execution. Gentlemen, Rachel said quietly, you're talking about activating a dead operative for a mission that officially can't happen to save hostages whose existence probably isn't acknowledged in any public records. Derek met her gaze directly. Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what we're talking about. Rachel moved back to her workbench and opened the locked drawer containing her precision tools. But this time, she removed something else, a small key that unlocked a different cabinet entirely. Inside was equipment that made all 4 Green Berets understand they were looking at a professional arsenal that had been maintained in perfect condition for 18 years. Custom rifles and protective cases, precision optics, specialized ammunition, and ballistic computers that represented technology none of them had seen before. If I do this, Rachel said, her hands moving over equipment she hadn't touched in nearly 2 decades, there's no going back to being a shopkeeper. Angel 7 doesn't get to retire twice. Derek understood the weight of what she was saying. Ma'am, what are you telling us? Rachel lifted out a rifle case and set it on her workbench. The case was unmarked, but the precision of its construction and the care with which it had been maintained suggested it contained something extraordinary. I'm telling you, she said, opening the case to reveal a custom rifle that was clearly the product of years of refinement and modification, that making this shot means accepting that Angel 7 never really died. She's just been sleeping. The rifle in the case was unlike anything the 4 men had ever seen. Every component had been precision manufactured, hand-fitted, and tested to tolerances that exceeded military specifications. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a work of art designed for a single purpose, making impossible shots at distances that challenged the laws of physics. Mike Harrison leaned closer. Ma'am, What's the effective range on this system? Rachel's smile was grim but determined. As far as I need it to be. Derek made the call that would change everything. Angel 7, you're officially reactivated. Mission authorization comes from the highest levels. You have full operational support and complete tactical authority. Rachel looked at the rifle, then at the 4 men who were asking her to become someone she'd spent 18 years trying to forget. Gentlemen, she said, beginning the process of checking the rifle's action with movements that spoke of muscle memory developed over decades, let's go save some Americans. Outside Fine Time Repairs, the small town continued its peaceful existence, unaware that one of the most dangerous women in military history had just returned from the dead. The transformation was subtle but complete. As Rachel Torres handled the custom rifle, 18 years of carefully maintained civilian persona fell away like a discarded coat. Her movements became economical and precise. Her eyes took on the cold calculation of someone who had spent years measuring distance in terms of bullet drop and wind drift. And her voice carried the quiet authority of an operator who had never missed when lives depended on accuracy. Before we go any further, she said, field stripping the rifle with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, you need to understand what you're asking for. Angel 7 wasn't just a call sign. It was a weapons system. Me, this rifle, and the kind of support infrastructure that doesn't officially exist. Derek Walsh watched in fascination as Rachel inspected each component of the weapon with the kind of attention most people reserved for priceless artifacts. Every surface was examined, every tolerance checked, every connection verified with the methodical precision of someone who understood that mechanical failure at the wrong moment meant mission failure. The rifle, she continued, holding up the custom barrel, is chambered for a .338 Lapua Magnum, but modified to handle custom loads that exceed standard specifications. Barrel length is 32 inches, free-floated, with a custom rifling twist optimized for the specific bullets I manufacture myself. Kevin Park leaned closer. You manufacture your own ammunition? Standard military ammunition is designed for acceptable accuracy across a range of conditions and weapons, Rachel explained, moving to another cabinet and retrieving brass casings, powder, and precision bullets. When you need to guarantee a hit at extreme range, you need ammunition tailored specifically to your rifle, your conditions, and your mission requirements. She held up one of the bullets, a sleek, precision-manufactured projectile that was clearly the product of years of refinement. These bullets are hand-cast from a custom alloy, weight-sorted to tolerances measured in fractions of grains, and ballistically matched to the barrel characteristics of this specific rifle. Tom Bradley was beginning to understand the level of preparation involved. How long does it take to develop ammunition to these specifications? Years, Rachel replied simply. Each load is tested at multiple distances in various environmental conditions with detailed documentation of performance characteristics. What you're looking at represents thousands of hours of development and testing. Mike Harrison studied the ballistic datasheet she was retrieving from her files. Ma'am, these performance numbers, they're beyond anything I've seen in military specifications. Military specifications are designed for equipment that needs to function reliably in the hands of soldiers with varying skill levels under unpredictable conditions. This system is designed for one purpose, making shots that standard equipment can't make. Derek activated his tablet and pulled up mission details. Angel 7, what do you need to know about the operational environment? Rachel set aside the rifle components and focused entirely on Derek. The casual shopkeeper was completely gone now, replaced by someone who radiated the kind of controlled lethality that made seasoned special operations personnel instinctively respectful. Everything, she said. Target location, approach routes, overwatch positions, environmental conditions, enemy force disposition, extraction plans, and contingencies for when everything goes wrong. Derek transferred the mission files to a secure display tablet and handed it to Rachel. What followed was 15 minutes of the most detailed operational analysis any of the Green Berets had ever witnessed.
Rachel didn't just review the intelligence, she absorbed it, processed it, and began identifying problems and solutions with the kind of tactical acumen that came from years of solo operations where backup was measured in days rather than minutes. The overwatch position, she pointed to a ridgeline on the satellite image, offers good concealment and a clear line of sight to the target, but it's also the obvious choice. Any competent enemy force will have security elements covering that approach. Kevin looked at the terrain analysis. What's the alternative? Rachel zoomed in on a different section of the map. Here, secondary ridgeline, further distance, but better concealment. The shot would be approximately 1,500 meters instead of 1,200 meters, but the approach is through terrain that enemy forces are less likely to monitor. Tom Bradley felt his stomach tighten. 1,500 meters? That's beyond the effective range of any standard sniper system. It's beyond the effective range of standard systems operated by standard personnel, Rachel corrected. But this isn't a standard system, and I'm not standard personnel. She pulled up ballistic calculation software on her tablet and began inputting environmental data. Elevation difference between firing position and target, wind patterns typical for that terrain and time of year, temperature variations, atmospheric pressure. All of these factors affect bullet trajectory at extreme range.
Mike Harrison watched the calculations appearing on screen. Ma'am, you're accounting for variables that most snipers never even consider. Most snipers never need to make shots where missing means watching Americans die, Rachel replied, her voice carrying the weight of experience that none of the four men could fully comprehend. Derek leaned forward. Angel 7, what's your assessment? Can you make this shot? Rachel studied the mission parameters for several more minutes, her eyes moving between topographical data, weather reports, and intelligence estimates. Finally, she looked up at the four Green Berets with an expression that made them understand they were witnessing the resurrection of a legend. I can make the shot, she said with absolute certainty. But making the shot is the easy part. The challenge is getting into position, maintaining concealment while enemy forces search for us, and extracting successfully after revealing our location. Tom Bradley nodded. What do you need from us? Complete operational support, Rachel replied immediately. Transportation to the operational area, security during approach and extraction, communication support, and most importantly, absolute trust in my tactical decisions once we're in hostile territory. Derek studied her face. You're talking about taking tactical command of this operation. I'm talking about accepting responsibility for mission success, Rachel corrected. This isn't a conventional military operation with established procedures and backup support. This is a precision strike by a small team in hostile territory with no room for error. Kevin felt the weight of what they were undertaking. Ma'am, what's the probability of mission success? Rachel was quiet for a moment, then began reassembling her rifle with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of thousands of repetitions. If everything goes according to plan, if the intelligence is accurate, if environmental conditions are favorable, and if enemy forces don't detect our approach, 90%. And if things go wrong, Mike asked? Rachel's smile was grim but determined. Then we improvise, adapt, and complete the mission anyway, because that's what Angel 7 does. As the afternoon wore on, the small watch repair shop was transformed into an operational planning center. Maps covered the workbenches, communication equipment replaced delicate timepieces, and the four Green Berets found themselves following the lead of a woman who had officially been dead for 18 years. Gentlemen, Rachel said as she completed her final equipment checks, we leave at 0400 tomorrow. Mission timeline is tight, but manageable. Questions? Derek looked around at his team, seeing the mixture of anticipation and professional respect that came with working alongside a true expert. Angel 7, what happens after this mission? Do you disappear again? Rachel paused in her preparations and looked out the window at the peaceful street where she had spent 18 years learning to live without violence. Sergeant Derger, some doors can't be closed once they're opened. Angel 7 doesn't get to retire twice. The weight of that statement settled over the group. They weren't just reactivating a legendary sniper for one mission. They were ending an 18-year chapter of peace in the life of someone who had earned the right to anonymity. But as Rachel secured her equipment and prepared for a return to the world she had left behind, her expression showed no regret, only the focused determination of someone who understood that some calls to service couldn't be ignored. Angel 7 was awake, and tomorrow, impossible would become routine once again. The pre-dawn darkness at Fort Liberty's remote training facility was broken only by the tactical lights of the Green Berets as they established security around Range 47, a classified testing ground that few personnel even knew existed. Derek Walsh had spent most of the night coordinating with higher command, securing authorization for Angel 7 to demonstrate capabilities that had been buried in classified files for 18 years. Rachel Torres, though that identity was rapidly becoming a memory, arrived in full tactical gear that transformed her from a small-town shopkeeper into something that made seasoned special operations personnel step back with instinctive respect. The custom rifle case slung across her shoulder, precision equipment bags, and the controlled movements of someone who had spent years operating in hostile territory where mistakes meant death. Angel 7, Tom Bradley greeted her formally as she approached the firing line. Range is clear, environmental monitoring station is active, and we have observers at multiple distances to confirm impact. Rachel nodded, setting down her equipment and beginning a pre-mission ritual that the 4 Green Berets would never forget. She opened her rifle case with the reverence most people reserved for religious ceremonies, revealing the custom weapon system that represented decades of refinement and countless hours of precision work. "Gentlemen," she said, beginning the process of assembling her rifle with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, "what you're about to witness isn't just marksmanship. It's the application of 18 years of experience in situations where second place meant watching Americans die." Kevin Park checked the range conditions on his tablet. "Ma'am, current environmental conditions, temperature 42 degrees, humidity 68%, barometric pressure 29.87 and rising. Winds variable from the northwest at 8 to 12 miles per hour." Rachel attached her custom scope to the rifle, then spent several minutes making adjustments so precise that the movements were barely visible. Environmental conditions are favorable but not ideal. Real-world missions rarely offer ideal conditions. Mike Harrison was setting up spotting equipment at the observation post. "Angel 7, we have targets established at 800, 1200, 1500, and 1800 meters. Each target is an 8-inch circle, the same dimensions as your mission requirement." "Negative," Rachel said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect in situations where rank meant less than competence. 8-inch circles are training targets. In the field, you're shooting at specific points on human targets where a miss by inches can mean mission failure." She reached into her equipment bag and retrieved targets that made all 4 men pause. They were anatomically correct silhouettes with small circles marked over vital areas. Targets that required precision measured in fractions of inches rather than comfortable training tolerances. "These targets," she continued, "represent the difference between training and reality. When you're making a shot to disable a guard without alerting his companions, when you're targeting a specific individual in a group of hostages, when you're hitting electronic equipment that must be destroyed without causing collateral damage, that's when you learn what precision really means." Derek Walsh established communication with the tower control tower. "Tower, this is Bravo 6. We are commencing live fire exercise with Angel 7. All personnel clear the impact areas." Rachel positioned herself behind her rifle with the kind of economy of movement that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. But what struck the observers wasn't just her technical proficiency. It was the complete transformation that occurred when she settled into firing position. The woman who had fixed watches for 18 years disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who radiated the kind of controlled lethality that made veteran operators recognize they were witnessing something extraordinary. 800 meters, she said, her voice now carrying the flat, professional tone of someone calling distances that would challenge most military marksmen. Wind drift compensation, 2 minutes left, elevation adjustment for temperature differential. The first shot was fired without fanfare, without dramatic buildup, with the kind of casual competence that made precision look effortless. Through his spotting scope, Mike Harrison watched the bullet impact exactly center of the target's vital zone. "Perfect hit," he called out, but his voice carried a note of awe that hadn't been there moments before. 1,200 meters.
Rachel continued, making scope adjustments with movements so subtle they were almost invisible. Increased wind drift, bullet drop approximately 36 inches, atmospheric pressure compensation. The second shot followed the same pattern, calm, controlled, executed with the kind of confidence that came from never missing when it mattered. The bullet found its mark with surgical precision. Kevin Park was tracking impact data on his tablet. "Ma'am, both shots are within half an inch of center. That's accuracy beyond anything I've seen in 15 years of military service."
1,500 meters, Rachel announced, her voice remaining steady as she prepared for a shot that would challenge the capabilities of any sniper system in the world. Multiple environmental factors, significant bullet drop, wind drift variables across the entire flight path. This time, the pause before firing was longer, not from hesitation, but from the kind of careful preparation that recognized the increased complexity of the shot. When the rifle fired, the sound echoed across the range with the finality of judgment being rendered. "Impact," Mike Harrison called out, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Dead center. Ma'am, that's an impossible shot with any standard equipment." 1,800 meters, Rachel said, beginning adjustments for a distance that pushed beyond the theoretical limits of precision shooting. This distance requires compensation for the Coriolis effect, atmospheric density variations, and bullet flight time that allows environmental conditions to change during the shot. Ton Bradley checked his calculations. Angel 7. At 1,800 meters, bullet flight time is approximately 2.5 seconds. Environmental conditions could shift during the shot. "They will shift," Rachel agreed, continuing her scope adjustments with movements that suggested she was accounting for variables the others couldn't even identify, which is why you calculate for conditions at mid-flight rather than current conditions at the firing position. The final shot required nearly 3 minutes of preparation. Rachel's breathing became controlled and rhythmic, her position adjusted to tolerances measured in fractions of degrees, her scope settings refined to account for factors that existed at the very edge of ballistic science. When she fired, the silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. At 1,800 meters, even sound took time to travel, and the 4 Green Berets found themselves holding their breath as they waited for confirmation of impact. "Jesus Christ," Mike Harrison whispered through his spotting scope. "Perfect center hit. Ma'am, that shot, that's not humanly possible." Rachel began disassembling her rifle with the same methodical precision she had used to assemble it. "Gentlemen, what you just witnessed is the difference between training for qualification and training for mission success. What you just witnessed is why Angel 7 was considered a strategic asset rather than just a sniper." Derek Walsh approached the firing position with obvious respect. "Angel 7, in 23 years of military service, I have never seen shooting at this level. What you just demonstrated goes beyond marksmanship. It's a completely different understanding of precision." "Sergeant Major," Rachel replied, securing her equipment with movements that spoke of preparing for immediate deployment, "what I just demonstrated is routine performance under ideal conditions. Tomorrow, in hostile territory, with enemy forces actively searching for us, with mission success dependent on a single shot, that's when you learn what Angel 7 really means." As the group prepared to leave Range 47, each of the 4 Green Berets understood that they weren't just working with an exceptional sniper. They were partnering with someone who had redefined what was possible when American lives hung in the balance. The proving ground had become a demonstration of capabilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about precision shooting. Tomorrow, those capabilities would be tested under conditions where failure meant watching hostages die. Angel 7 was ready for the mission that would either confirm her legend or end it forever.
The Tactical Operations Center at Fort Liberty had been transformed into a nerve center of controlled intensity. Multiple screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds, weather data, and satellite imagery of the target area, while secure communication links connected the team to command elements across 3 time zones. At the center of it all, Rachel Torres, now fully committed to her role as Angel 7, studied mission parameters with the kind of focused attention that had made her legendary 18 years ago.
Updated intelligence, Colonel Lisa Morgan announced as she entered the briefing room, carrying classified folders that required special clearance even for Green Beret personnel. The hostage situation has deteriorated. We now have confirmation that execution timeline has been moved up again. We have 18 hours, not 36. Derek Walsh felt his stomach tighten. Ma'am, that gives us 12 hours for transit and 6 hours for positioning and mission execution. There's no margin for error. Rachel looked up from the ballistic calculations she'd been refining. Colonel, what's changed about the target environment? Morgan activated a secure display showing enhanced satellite imagery. Enemy forces have increased security around the compound. Additional personnel, improved observation posts, and what appears to be electronic surveillance equipment that wasn't there 48 hours ago. Kevin Park studied the new intelligence. They know something is coming. Or they're preparing to move the hostages, Tom Bradley added grimly. Either way, this just became significantly more complicated. Rachel stood and moved to the large tactical display, her eyes systematically analyzing the updated information with the kind of professional assessment that made veteran officers instinctively defer to her expertise. The additional security works in our favor, she said, surprising everyone in the room. Mike Harrison looked at her skeptically. How does increased enemy presence help us? Because increased security means predictable patterns, Rachel explained, using a laser pointer to highlight specific areas on the satellite image. More personnel requires more coordination, more communication, more routine. Routine creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited by someone who understands how security operations function. She zoomed in on the compound's guard towers. The original plan called for a shot at the primary observation post to disable early warning capability, but with additional security, that approach becomes a tactical mistake. Derek leaned forward. What's the alternative? Rachel traced her finger across the terrain map, highlighting elevation changes and sightlines with the kind of tactical acumen that came from years of solo operations in hostile territory. We target the electronic communication array instead of personnel, disable their coordination capability rather than just eliminating one observer. Colonel Morgan studied Rachel's proposed approach. Angel 7, targeting electronic equipment requires even greater precision than targeting personnel. The margin for error becomes microscopic. The margin for error was always microscopic, Rachel replied calmly, but targeting equipment creates chaos without immediately alerting every guard in the compound. It gives the assault team a tactical advantage that personnel elimination can't provide. Tom Bradley was already recalculating mission parameters. What's the target window for electronic equipment? Rachel pulled up technical specifications on her tablet. Communication arrays typically have vulnerable points measuring approximately 4 inches square. Targeting the primary antenna connection point would disable the entire system while creating the appearance of equipment malfunction rather than hostile action. Kevin felt a chill. 4 inches at 1,500 meters in hostile territory with one shot. With one shot, Rachel confirmed, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had never missed when American lives depended on accuracy. Colonel Morgan made a decision that would define the mission parameters. Angel 7, you have tactical authority for this operation. Mission planning, approach routes, timing, your call. Rachel nodded, accepting command responsibility with the kind of natural authority that made rank seem irrelevant. We depart in 4 hours. Transit time to operational area is 6 hours. That gives us 8 hours for final positioning and mission execution. She moved to a detailed topographical map and began marking specific waypoints with precision that spoke of extensive field experience. Insertion point here, approximately 12 kilometers from target. Approach route follows this ridgeline to minimize exposure to enemy observation posts. Mike Harrison traced the route she'd marked. That's some challenging terrain, especially carrying precision equipment. Challenging terrain provides concealment, Rachel replied. Standard military doctrine favors easy approaches because they're efficient, but efficient approaches are also predictable, and predictable gets people killed. Derek studied the mission timeline. 8 hours from insertion to shot execution? That's cutting it close. It's exactly the timeline we need, Rachel corrected. Longer positioning time increases risk of detection. Shorter timeline doesn't allow for proper environmental assessment. 8 hours gives us optimum balance between preparation and security. Colonel Morgan activated secure communication links to higher command. All elements, this is control. Mission authorization is confirmed. Angel 7 has tactical command. All supporting units will coordinate through Bravo 6. As the briefing continued, each member of the team began to understand that they weren't just participating in a rescue operation, they were witnessing the reactivation of a capability that had been dormant for 18 years but retained all of its lethal effectiveness. Rachel's mission planning was unlike anything the Green Berets had experienced. Every decision was based on variables that most operators never considered, contingencies that accounted for situations that hadn't occurred yet, and a level of tactical thinking that came from years of operating alone in environments where backup was measured in days rather than minutes. "Equipment check," she announced, moving to the gear staging area where her custom rifle and precision equipment waited alongside standard military kit. Each team member carries specific equipment loads optimized for mission requirements and extraction scenarios. Tom Bradley reviewed his assigned gear. "Angel 7, you're carrying significantly more weight than standard sniper equipment loads." Standard loads are designed for operations with logistical support and backup assets. When you're operating without support, when extraction depends on mission success, when there's no opportunity for resupply, you carry everything you might need, regardless of weight. Kevin watched her methodical preparation process. "Ma'am, you're planning for contingencies that go beyond the primary mission." "I'm planning for survival," Rachel replied simply. "Because the mission doesn't end with pulling the trigger. The mission ends when everyone comes home alive." As the final hours before departure ticked away, the Tactical Operations Center maintained the controlled urgency of a unit preparing for high-stakes operations. But at the center of the activity, Rachel Torres had completed her transformation into Angel 7, a legend returning to the environment where legends were either confirmed or destroyed. Derek Walsh approached her during the final equipment inspection. "Angel 7, in 30 years of special operations, I've never worked with anyone who plans at your level of detail. What you're doing goes beyond military doctrine." Rachel secured her rifle in its transport case and shouldered her gear with movements that spoke of countless similar preparations. "Sergeant Major, military doctrine is designed for operations with official support, backup assets, and acceptable loss ratios. What we're doing tomorrow has none of those advantages." "So what do we have?" Rachel's smile was grim but confident. "We have the element of surprise, superior preparation, and 18 years of experience in making impossible shots when failure means watching Americans die." As the team prepared for departure, each member understood that they were about to participate in an operation that would either succeed brilliantly or fail catastrophically, with no middle ground between triumph and disaster. Angel 7 was going back to war, and tomorrow would prove whether legends could survive their own resurrections. Dawn was still 3 hours away when Angel 7 settled into her final firing position on the wind-swept ridge overlooking the hostile compound. 18 hours of careful movement through terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers had brought the team to within 1,547 meters of their target, close enough for precision work, far enough to maintain tactical advantage. The past 6 hours had been spent in methodical preparation that transformed the rocky outcropping into a precision shooting platform. Derek Walsh and his Green Berets had established security positions that provided 360-degree observation, while Rachel completed the kind of environmental assessment that separated legendary marksmen from merely excellent ones. "Environmental conditions stabilized," Kevin Park reported through their tactical communication system, his voice barely above a whisper despite their electronic encryption. "Temperature, 38 degrees and steady, humidity, 72%, barometric pressure, 29.91 and rising slowly." Rachel made microscopic adjustments to her custom scope, compensating for atmospheric conditions that would affect bullet trajectory over the nearly mile-long flight path. Through her precision optics, the target compound appeared close enough to touch, But she knew that illusion could be deadly for anyone who didn't understand the physics of extreme range shooting. Wind conditions, she said quietly, requesting information that would determine whether the shot was possible under current circumstances. Mike Harrison consulted multiple anemometers positioned at various points around their position. Variable winds northwest to north-northeast, 6 to 9 miles per hour at our elevation. Downrange winds appear lighter, estimated 3 to 5 miles per hour across the target area. The wind data was favorable, but not ideal. At 1,547 meters, even slight crosswinds could deflect a bullet enough to miss a 4-inch target by significant margins. But Rachel had spent 18 years learning to make shots under conditions that challenged the laws of physics. Target acquisition, Tom Bradley reported from his observation position. Communication array is clearly visible. Primary antenna connection point is exposed. No personnel in immediate vicinity. Rachel settled behind her rifle with the kind of practiced ease that came from thousands of repetitions in environments where comfort was measured in degrees of survival rather than physical convenience. The custom weapon system felt like an extension of her nervous system, every control and adjustment as familiar as her own heartbeat. Through her scope, the target resolved into crystal clarity. The communication array's primary antenna connection, a junction box measuring approximately 4 inches square, appeared perfectly centered in her crosshairs. But at 1,547 meters, the margin for error was measured in fractions of inches. Range confirmed at 1,547 meters, she said, beginning the final calculations that would determine bullet trajectory. Elevation angle, -4 degrees. Atmospheric density correction factor, 1.03. Wind drift compensation, 2 minutes right. Derek Walsh monitored the compound through his own observation equipment, watching for any change in enemy patrol patterns that might compromise the mission. Angel 7, security sweep shows normal activity, no indication of heightened awareness. You are clear to engage when ready. Rachel's breathing became deep and rhythmic, her heart rate dropping to levels that most people achieved only during deep sleep. This was the zone that separated precision marksmen from everyone else, a state of controlled calm where external factors faded away and the universe narrowed to the relationship between rifle, bullet, and target. Bullet flight time approximately 2.4 seconds, she said, more to herself than to the team. Environmental conditions may shift during flight, calculating for mid-trajectory conditions rather than current position data. The adjustments she made to her scope were so subtle they were barely visible, but each represented years of experience in understanding how atmospheric conditions affected bullet performance over extreme distances. Temperature variations, humidity changes, even microscopic shifts in barometric pressure could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Angel 7, you are cleared to engage target, Derek said, formally giving official authorization for a shot that would either confirm her legendary status or end it forever. Rachel's final preparation was a ritual that had been refined over decades of precision shooting. Her body position adjusted to tolerances measured in millimeters, her breathing synchronized with natural biorhythms, and her mental focus narrowed to exclude everything except the mathematical relationship between her rifle and a target nearly a mile away.
The compound below showed no sign of awareness that death was calculating its approach from a windswept ridge that offered perfect concealment and an unobstructed view of the target area. Guards continued their routine patrols, electronic equipment functioned normally, and the hostages remained unaware that their rescue depended on a single bullet, finding a 4-inch target at a distance that challenged the capabilities of any weapons system in the world. Wind holding steady, Mike Harrison reported. Environmental conditions optimal for engagement. Rachel's finger found the trigger with the kind of familiarity that came from thousands of hours of practice under conditions that ranged from perfect to impossible. The custom rifle had been built specifically for shots like this one, situations where standard equipment wasn't sufficient and the margin for error approached 0. Through her scope, the target remained perfectly centered, 4 inches of metal and circuitry that controlled communication for the entire compound,
positioned at a distance that required compensation for variables most marksmen never considered. One shot to create the tactical advantage that would allow American hostages to return home alive. Engaging target, Rachel said, her voice carrying the calm finality of someone who had never missed when American lives depended on accuracy. The trigger broke with the precision of her custom rifle's action, releasing a .338 Lapua Magnum round that had been hand-loaded to specifications that pushed the boundaries of ballistic science. The recoil was substantial, but controlled, absorbed by a shooting position that had been refined through years of experience in environments where follow-up shots weren't possible. For 2.4 seconds, physics governed the bullet's flight path. Gravity pulled it downward while forward momentum carried it toward the target. Crosswinds deflected its trajectory by calculated amounts, while atmospheric density affected its velocity in ways that had been anticipated and compensated for during the pre-shot preparation. Impact, Tom Bradley called out through his spotting scope, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Direct hit on primary target. Communication array is down. Repeat, target neutralized. Derek Walsh immediately activated his communication link to the assault team. Thunder 6, this is Overwatch. Primary target neutralized. You are cleared for immediate assault. Communications blackout is in effect. Rachel began the process of securing her equipment with the same methodical precision she had used to prepare for the shot. The mission wasn't complete until everyone was safely extracted, but the impossible shot had been made under conditions that would have challenged the capabilities of any marksman in military history. Angel 7, target assessment, Kevin Park requested, needing confirmation for the after-action report that would document this operation for classified files. Rachel completed her equipment check and prepared for immediate movement to the extraction point. Target destroyed with single round. Communication array completely disabled. Assault team has tactical advantage for hostage extraction. As the team prepared to move from their firing position, each member understood that they had just witnessed something that would become part of Special Operations legend. A 1,547-meter precision shot that hit a 4-inch target under field conditions, executed by someone whose skills had been dormant for 18 years but retained all of their lethal effectiveness. The impossible had become routine, exactly as Angel 7 had promised. Now came the equally challenging task of extracting successfully while hostile forces discovered that their secure compound had been penetrated by someone who could reach out and touch them from distances they couldn't even imagine.
12 hours after the successful hostage extraction, the debriefing room at Fort Liberty buzzed with controlled intensity as senior military officials processed an operation that would rewrite the textbooks on precision shooting and special operations coordination. The 3 rescued American intelligence operatives were safe, the hostile compound had been neutralized, and Angel 7 had confirmed her legendary status with a shot that challenged the boundaries of what was considered humanly possible. General Patricia Hayes, commander of all special operations forces in the region, studied the mission reports with the kind of attention reserved for operations that would influence military doctrine for decades to come. Angel 7, she said, addressing Rachel directly, your shot yesterday was recorded by multiple independent observation systems. The data confirms a precision hit at 1,547 meters on a 4-inch target under field conditions. This exceeds any documented precision shooting performance in military history. Rachel sat in her civilian clothes, the tactical gear of Angel 7 carefully stored away, but the transformation back to small-town shopkeeper was incomplete. 18 years of enforced anonymity had been shattered by a single mission, and everyone in the room understood that there was no path back to the quiet life she had built. General, Rachel replied, the shot was successful because of superior preparation, optimal equipment, and favorable environmental conditions. It represents the application of techniques developed over years of experience, not an exceptional individual performance. Derek Walsh leaned forward from his position at the briefing table. Ma'am, with respect, what you accomplished yesterday goes beyond technique and equipment. 3 separate ballistic analysis teams have confirmed that the shot you made was at the absolute edge of physical possibility. Colonel Lisa Morgan activated a secure display showing ballistic trajectory analysis that had been compiled by military experts who specialized in extreme range shooting. Angel 7, the computational models suggest that your shot required compensation for variables that most marksmen never encounter. Coriolis effect, atmospheric density variations, temperature differential across the bullet's flight path, factors that exist at the very limits of ballistic science. Rachel studied the analysis with professional interest, noting how military scientists had attempted to quantify skills that had been developed through experience rather than theoretical study. The variables you're describing become routine considerations when you're operating at distances where standard procedures aren't sufficient. Tom Bradley spoke up from his position as team leader. Ma'am, what you're calling routine would be impossible for 99% of military marksmen. The Green Berets who witnessed your preparation and execution understand that we were watching capabilities that exist outside normal training parameters. General Hayes made a decision that would change everything for Angel 7. Ms. Torres, or would you prefer Angel 7? The Department of Defense has a proposition for you. Rachel's expression remained neutral, but Derek Walsh noticed her posture shift slightly, the subtle alertness of someone preparing for information that might fundamentally alter their existence. I'm listening, General. We want to offer you a position as Senior Instructor for Advanced Precision Shooting at the Special Operations Command. Full military rank restoration, access to unlimited resources for equipment development, and authority to train the next generation of precision marksmen using methods that you've proven effective under combat conditions. The offer hung in the air like the echo of a precision shot. Rachel Torres, who had spent 18 years learning to live without violence, was being asked to return permanently to the world where her skills made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Kevin Park, who had observed Rachel's transformation from shopkeeper to legend, spoke carefully. Ma'am, what General Hayes is offering goes beyond just teaching. You'd be establishing doctrine that would influence special operations training for decades. The position, General Hayes continued, would also include authority to establish your own unit, a specialized precision shooting team that could be deployed for operations that exceed the capabilities of conventional sniper teams. Mike Harrison understood the implications immediately. A unit of Angel 7 level marksmen, people who could make shots that currently exist outside the realm of possibility. Rachel was quiet for several minutes, processing an offer that represented everything she had walked away from 18 years ago. The opportunity to operate officially, with unlimited resources, training the best marksmen in the military to achieve capabilities that approached her own legendary skills. General, she said finally, accepting your offer means acknowledging that Angel 7 never really died. It means accepting that some people are too valuable to remain anonymous, regardless of their personal preferences.
It means accepting that your country needs your capabilities, General Hayes replied. Yesterday's mission proved that there are situations where conventional approaches aren't sufficient, where the difference between success and failure is measured in the precision that only someone with your experience can provide. Derek Walsh leaned back in his chair, understanding that he was witnessing the formal resurrection of a legend. Angel 7, what you demonstrated yesterday and what you could teach others represents a strategic advantage that can't be quantified in traditional military terms. Rachel stood and walked to the window overlooking the training facilities where she had proven her capabilities were intact after 18 years of dormancy. Outside, young soldiers practiced marksmanship at distances that would have been considered extreme just days ago, but now seemed routine in comparison to what she had accomplished. If I accept this position, she said, I want complete authority over training methods, equipment specifications, and personnel selection. I want the ability to develop capabilities that exist outside standard military doctrine. Granted, General Hayes replied immediately. You will have resources and authority that match the significance of what you're being asked to accomplish. Tom Bradley realized they were discussing the establishment of something unprecedented in military history. Ma'am, you're talking about creating a precision shooting capability that would give American forces advantages in situations where conventional approaches fail.
I'm talking about ensuring that future Angel 7s don't have to spend 18 years in exile because their capabilities are too classified to acknowledge. I'm talking about creating a framework where precision marksmen can operate officially while maintaining the skills that make impossible shots routine. Colonel Morgan activated her secure communication link. General, I'll begin processing the necessary authorizations for Angel 7's appointment. This will require coordination at the highest levels of government. As the meeting concluded, Rachel understood that her quiet life as a watch repair shop owner was ending permanently. But she also understood that the capabilities she had spent 18 years keeping dormant could now be used to save American lives on a scale that individual missions couldn't achieve. Gentlemen, she said, addressing the Green Berets who had discovered her and witnessed her return to active duty, thank you for reminding me that some skills are too important to keep buried. Derek Walsh stood and extended his hand. Angel 7, thank you for proving that legends can live up to their reputations. As Rachel shook hands with each member of the team that had brought her back to life, she reflected on the journey from anonymous shopkeeper to officially recognized strategic asset. The precision that had once been used to fix delicate timepieces would now be applied to developing the next generation of marksmen who could make shots that existed at the very edge of possibility. Angel 7 was no longer just a legend whispered about in classified briefings. She was now a strategic capability that would influence special operations doctrine for decades to come. The watch repair shop would remain closed. Angel 7 had work to do.
6 months after her official resurrection, Colonel Rachel Torres stood in the state-of-the-art precision shooting facility that had been constructed specifically for the Angel 7 training program. The sprawling complex at Fort Liberty represented the largest investment in specialized marksmanship training in military history, complete with environmental simulation chambers, custom ammunition manufacturing facilities, and technology that pushed the boundaries of ballistic science. But what made Rachel most proud wasn't the sophisticated equipment or unlimited budget. It was watching Staff Sergeant Kevin Park execute a successful 1,200-meter shot under simulated combat conditions, applying techniques that had taken her decades to develop, but that he had mastered in 6 months of intensive training. Impact Confirmed called out Master Sergeant Derek Walsh, now serving as Rachel's deputy instructor and the first graduate of the Angel 7 program. Perfect center hit on target. That's his 7th consecutive success at this distance. Rachel lowered her spotting scope and nodded approvingly. Kevin, what was your compensation calculation for the crosswind variance? 4 minutes left, adjusting for wind speed differential between firing position and target, Kevin replied, beginning the process of securing his rifle. The atmospheric density reading required an additional half-minute elevation adjustment. Correct. And why did you choose that specific compensation rather than the standard calculation? Kevin paused thoughtfully, understanding that Angel 7's questions were always designed to develop reasoning rather than just verify knowledge. Because standard calculations assume uniform conditions across the bullet's flight path. At extreme range, you have to account for environmental variations that occur during the 2.3 seconds of bullet flight time. Rachel smiled, the first genuine expression of satisfaction Derek had seen since she accepted her new position. Exactly right. Standard doctrine works for standard distances. When you're pushing beyond what most people consider possible, you need to think beyond standard solutions. The morning training session was interrupted by the arrival of General Patricia Hayes, accompanied by a delegation of senior officers from multiple allied nations. Word of the Angel 7 program had spread throughout the international special operations community, and requests for training assistance had arrived from 12 different countries. Colonel Torres, General Hayes greeted her formally, though both women understood that Rachel's authority in matters of precision shooting now exceeded traditional military hierarchy. I'd like you to meet Colonel James Morrison from the British SAS, Lieutenant Colonel Maria Gonzalez from Spanish Special Operations, and Major Klaus Weber from German KSK. Rachel acknowledged each officer with the professional courtesy of someone who understood that expertise transcended national boundaries. Gentlemen, ma'am, welcome to Fort Liberty. I understand you're here to assess the training program. Colonel Morrison stepped forward. His bearing suggested years of special operations experience. Colonel Torres, we've reviewed the performance data from your students.
What they're achieving exceeds anything we've documented in our own precision shooting programs. The students you're seeing represent 6 months of training using methods that took me 18 years to develop through trial and error in combat conditions. What you're witnessing is the application of hard-earned lessons rather than exceptional individual talent. Lieutenant Colonel Gonzalez studied the training facility with obvious professional interest. Colonel, your students are making shots that would be considered impossible using conventional training methods. How do you develop capabilities that exist outside normal doctrine? Rachel gestured toward the environmental simulation chamber, where Tom Bradley was conducting training with a group of advanced students. Conventional training prepares marksmen for ideal conditions. We train for impossible conditions. When your students can make precision shots in simulated sandstorms at extreme altitude with equipment that's been damaged by enemy action, routine conditions become simple. Major Weber observed the technical specifications posted throughout the facility. The ammunition specifications you're using exceed military standards. Custom loads developed specifically for extreme range applications. Standard ammunition is designed for acceptable performance across a range of weapons and conditions. When you need guaranteed performance at distances that challenge the laws of physics, you need ammunition that's optimized for specific weapons, specific conditions, and specific mission requirements.
Derek Walsh joined the group carrying a tablet with training results that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Colonel, we just completed the quarterly assessment. Average successful hit rate at 1,200 meters is now 87%. 6 months ago, our best marksmen were achieving 30% at that distance. The visiting officers exchanged glances that suggested they were witnessing something that would fundamentally change how their own forces approached precision shooting training. Colonel Torres, General Hayes said, I have authorization to expand the Angel 7 program internationally. Allied forces training, equipment sharing, and joint development of advanced precision shooting doctrine. Rachel considered the implications of teaching her methods to marksmen from allied nations, techniques that had been developed in classified American operations, but that could save lives regardless of nationality. General, I accept the expansion with one condition, she said. Any marksman who receives Angel 7 training commits to using those skills exclusively for missions that protect innocent lives. This program doesn't create assassins, it creates protectors. Colonel Morrison nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of ethical framework that makes this partnership valuable. As the delegation toured the facility, Rachel reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that morning when 4 Green Berets had walked into her watch repair shop. The quiet anonymity of civilian life had been replaced by recognition as one of the military's most valuable strategic assets. But what satisfied her most was watching young marksmen achieve capabilities that had once seemed impossible. Kevin Park, who had been skeptical of a civilian shopkeeper's abilities, was now making shots that placed him among the elite precision marksmen in the world. Derek Walsh had progressed from team leader to instructor, capable of teaching others the techniques that had once been Angel 7's exclusive domain. Colonel, Mike Harrison approached, now serving as the program's technical coordinator. We just received a priority mission request. Hostage situation in Eastern Europe requires position shooting at extreme range under challenging conditions. Rachel studied the mission parameters on Harrison's tablet, noting environmental factors and tactical constraints that would challenge even Angel 7 trained marksmen. Recommended team composition: Derek is primary shooter, Kevin is spotter, with Tom providing tactical coordination. This would be their first deployment as an independent Angel 7 team. It was exactly what Rachel had been working toward. Students who had developed capabilities that allowed them to operate independently, applying Angel 7 techniques to save lives without requiring her direct involvement. Mission approved, but I want complete after-action analysis for training program refinement. As the day concluded, Rachel stood alone in the precision shooting facility that had become the center of her new life. The delicate timepieces that had once occupied her attention had been replaced by rifles and ballistic computers, but the underlying principle remained the same: precision that could mean the difference between life and death.
Her secure phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. Angel 7 training program graduate successfully completed mission. 3 hostages extracted safely using 1,340-meter precision shot. Techniques performed exactly as trained. Thank you for giving us the tools to bring people home. Rachel smiled, understanding that her legacy would be measured not in the shots she made, but in the lives saved by marksmen she had trained to achieve the impossible. The watch repair shop remained closed, but Angel 7 had found a new way to fix things that were broken by teaching others to make shots that existed at the very edge of possibility when American lives hung in the balance. Some precision, she reflected, was worth preserving for posterity.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.